Call yourself a comic book fan? Well, Uncle Sam wants you to name 3 comic book colorists. I can probably name 100 pencilers, but to tell you the truth, I can name only 2 colorists. Lynn Varley, of course, and my favorite in the 90s, Steve Oliff. Imagine being a teenager in 1991, you're into McFarlane, and compare these two, McFarlane's last Marvel work, and then this image puppy. You can see that in the pencils, McFarlane's going for the same thing, that counter light and some fades. But in the Spawn, it just takes on a whole other level, and that's Steve Oliff. So let's do a deep dive into what makes him so cool, and then compare him to some other colorists. But first I need something to draw. I'll do Superman, so I can use the same colors as the Spawn cape. And when I draw Superman, my go-to is always him hovering in the sky, cape flapping in the wind. Maybe a nice dramatic view of the buildings around him. And I remembered this drawing I did a while back, trying out some minimalistic curve style. And I like the pose, but I want to draw a whole page, so maybe him and a window somehow. Flying out of a window. Or melancholically looking at the window, which is perfect for adding Lois on the page as well. Yes, that'll do. Okay, and then I can use these Spawn pages as color guides. Quick perspective grid with some rasterized letters. And maybe the Man of Steel is crying. Turns out his heart is not made of steel. By the way, Steve was a Marvel colorist before that as well. Check out this masterpiece. And of course, his Akira coloring got him an Eisner Award. Very deserved. Okay, line art done. Let's analyze the color. So what Steve did a lot in Spawn was work with fades. Like here in the background, going from dark brown to light brown. And I read he used Photoshop even back in 1991, so that means he must have used the gradient tool. Personally, I prefer using the soft brush tool to blend colors. It's quicker and it gives you some more control. And this cloud here is probably one of those effect brushes. Very easy to recreate. Just add a bit of blur to make it look the same. Yeah, spot on. This is interesting, how he does light on clothes. The light from the left is blue, but the shirt itself is kind of yellow-green. And the cutoff between the two is where McFarlane's inks showed the shadow line. Here's a straight vertical highlight line, which I never noticed before. And then the darkest accent is on the transition line. Okay, my colors are a bit too different, so go over the whole thing with a soft brush. Yeah, kind of looks like it. But the cape is where he really shines, because there are so many shadows to play with. Each separate plane gets its own fade. Then there's that hard shadow. I think it's called a pin light. Like the chains on the cape, or in that other one, the body itself on the cape. So no inks, just a darker color with a crisp outline. And another one of McFarlane's cool style things is where he doesn't draw the outline of something that connects. Like here, the bottom of the pants, he leaves it open so the fade can go all the way to the hard shadow. Looks very cool. Okay, let's do it. First, give every patch its own layer, then adding a mask layer over everything, then adding the basic underlying color. I'm just picking them from these Spawn pages so it'll look similar. Of course, that typical yellow for the light and buildings, and then one side of the buildings gets a darker tone. The sky looked good before, so let's go with that exact same one. With the blur, forgot the detail on the buildings. The other one gets some windows, copy paste. And my new favorite shortcut, the distort tool. This Superman cape is not as long and sharp as Spawn's, but I gave it enough flow so I can play with shadows and highlights. hard shadows will be under the arm and then this cape on itself. And why not use that McFarlane melting shape idea for the feet, so erasing the lines where they meet. Dropping the blacks didn't really work, so dark fades. I gotta practice dropping shadows. For the skin, he does a light base with a fade and then a dark shadow with a transition color in between. Just playing with the blending modes here to see if something looks good. I'll show this later in a bit more detail. Okay, add some people in the windows with the hard shadow and I think it's done. Which color for the text box? The original was best. Okay, I love the color vibe, fits in with the rest. Most comics before that were still doing the flat style, which looked like this because of the cheap paper. And then Marvel recolored everything for their digital archive. Not pretty in my opinion, it just sucks the character out of the stories. Recently, people like Alex Sinclair are hitting it out of the park with this style. Thanks Coben for introducing me to this guy. It reminds me kind of anime cell shading, where they have a highlight and then a gradient in the base color. Hard shadows for things that are close and soft shadows for round shapes. This style works for Jim Lee, but when I read Superman Year 1, it had that two-tone coloring and it just doesn't work for John Romita Jr. When it's an old school artist like that, I just feel flat coloring is best. But let's try this. This Wonder Woman is done beautifully, and the purple fade and yellow highlights give a roundness to all the basic underlying shapes. So let's do a male version. Wonder Man! Underlying base, purple fade for the round shapes, highlight on the edges, and the transition between them has an orange color. I kept everything on separate mask layers so I can easily nudge the colors with the smudge tool. That's that finger. Okay, quick review, and I'm sure this is not the official way to do it, but this is what I do. I make these layers, a flat with the base color, then a mask for the fade, and a mask on top of that for the highlight, and then just like an airbrush spray the colors over it. And if there's a hard shadow like on the bottom here, I just delete the fade to reveal the dark part, and then you can nudge or paint over or erase stuff. Anyway, back to Steve Oliff, who colored Bill Sienkiewicz's first Moon Knight. Yes, sir. Remember this ad from In Spawn? Armature is Steve Oliff's coloring company. The better you draw, the better we color. Said like a true boss. Alrighty, that's it for the Steve Oliff visit. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you in another challenge.